U.S. President Donald Trump is increasingly pushing other countries to support Washington's effort to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, but many of them are hesitant to get involved. And Trump has postponed this summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping citing the Middle East conflict. But speculation is high that it's Trump's tactic to pressure Beijing to join his plan. The South Korean government remains on heightened alert over the unfolding situation in the Middle East, with President Lee Jae-myung calling for preparations for worst-case scenarios related to the conflict. U.S. President Donald Trump has reiterated his request for South Korea and other nations to take part in efforts to secure the Strait of Hormuz, even citing the number of U.S. troops deployed in South Korea and Japan. Our Kim Bo-kyung has our top story this afternoon.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday once again urged countries, including South Korea, to actively help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking to the reporters at the White House, Trump said the U.S. strongly encourages other nations whose economies depend on the strait to help secure the key oil shipping route.
You know, we get less than 1% of our oil from the strait, and some countries get much more. Japan gets 95%. China gets 90%. Many of the Europeans get quite a bit. South Korea gets 35%. So we want them to come and help us with the strait.
Trump has accused allies of showing low enthusiasm for the coalition, which he says would matter to him.
Some are countries that we've helped for many, many years. We've protected them from horrible outside sources. And they weren't that enthusiastic. And the level of enthusiasm matters to me.
Later on at his office, he further pressured South Korea and other countries, saying the U.S. have 45,000 troops stationed each in Japan and South Korea, and between 45,000 and 50,000 in Germany. Though the exact scale of U.S. troop deployments differs from the facts, as there are about 50,000 in Japan, 28,500 in Korea, and around 35,000 in Germany, his remarks are seen as a way to point out how these countries are hesitating in engaging in military cooperation between the U.S. and Iran. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also stressed the importance of global cooperation to ensure security in the Strait of Hormuz, a move seen as laying the groundwork for an official request at the U.S. government level. This during Rubio's phone talks with his South Korean counterpart Cho Hyun on Monday. The talks were held at the request of the U.S., and Rubio, according to the Foreign Ministry, asked for support and interest to bring peace and stability to the region. Earlier, the Blue House had kept a cautious stance regarding this issue during Monday's briefing, saying it needs sufficient deliberation between Seoul and Washington. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
And Trump has also asked to postpone his upcoming trip to Beijing, originally scheduled for later this month. However, U.S. officials have dismissed the speculation that the delay is linked to efforts to pressure China over security in the Strait of Hormuz. Oh Soo-young reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he has asked China to delay his planned visit to Beijing by about a month. Speaking at the Oval Office on Monday, Trump said he still wants to travel to China, but feels he needs to remain in the United States while the Middle East conflict continues. White House spokesperson Carolyn Leavitt said earlier in the day that the dates may be moved as Trump prioritizes overseeing the U.S. military operation against Iran. The Beijing trip had been scheduled for March 31st to April 2nd for talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping that had been expected to help stabilize the rocky relations between the world's two largest economies. This comes amid tensions around the Strait of Hormuz, as Iran has threatened to set fire on vessels transiting the vital waterway. Trump has urged several countries, including China, to help protect commercial shipping in the strait, but Beijing has not directly responded. Still, preparations for a potential Trump-Xi summit have continued. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng held 2 days of talks in Paris aimed at preparing possible agreements on rare earth supply chains and expanded Chinese purchases of U.S. farm goods. Wrapping up the talks on Monday, Bessent said if the summit is delayed, it wouldn't be due to war politics, but logistics.
If the president's visit is postponed, it would have nothing to do with the Chinese making a commitment to the Straits of Hormuz. It would obviously be in their interest to do so, but a postponement would not be as a result of any ask from the president not being met. The postponement, if it happens, would be because the commander-in-chief of the United States military believes that he should stay in the United States while this war is being prosecuted.
Beijing said Monday that the two sides remain in contact regarding Trump's visit.
Heads of state diplomacy plays an irreplaceable role in providing strategic guidance for China-U.S. relations. China and the U.S. are in communication regarding President Trump's visit to China.
The spokesperson did not respond directly to questions about Washington's call for assistance in the strait. Woo Seong, Arirang News.
While President Donald Trump continues to push for a coalition against Iran, key U.S. allies, particularly in Europe, remain hesitant to become involved. Lee Seung-jae has the details.
Several key U.S. allies said Monday they have no immediate plans to send naval forces to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, pushing back against President Donald Trump's request for military support to keep the vital waterway open. Trump had called on partner nations to help police the strategic strait after Iran responded to joint U.S.-Israeli strikes with drones, missiles, and naval mines, effectively shutting down tanker traffic through the narrow channel. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most critical energy choke points, normally carrying about 1/5 of global oil shipments, as well as large volumes of liquefied natural gas. European leaders signaled clear reluctance to involve NATO in the escalating conflict. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz made it clear on Monday that Germany would not take part in the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran.
Like the United States and Israel, we want to see an end to Iran's nuclear and missile programs, but we will not take part in this war. We have said this from day one. That remains the position of the federal government.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also rejected suggestions that the military alliance could be used to secure shipping routes through this strait, reinforcing a broader European stance against expanding NATO's role in the crisis.
We will protect our people in the region. Second, while taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war. And third, we will keep working towards a swift resolution that brings security and stability back to the region.
The pushback comes as tensions grow between Washington and its European allies over how far the alliance should be drawn into the conflict, which has now entered its third week. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In the meantime, the conflict in the Middle East is entering a dangerous new phase as Israel officially launches a ground invasion into southern Lebanon. Our Chung Hae-rim has the details.
Israel's military says its troops have begun what it calls limited and targeted ground operations against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. This action marks a major escalation, expanding Israel's campaign beyond Iran to target one of Tehran's key regional allies. The Israel Defense Forces stated that thousands of troops from its 91st Division are now operating against key Hezbollah strongholds. Sweeping evacuation orders have been issued, telling all residents south of the Litani River to leave the area immediately. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warned that displaced residents will not be able to return until the threat to northern Israel is fully removed. Meanwhile, the humanitarian toll continues to mount. According to Lebanese authorities, Israeli attacks have killed over 850 people and displaced nearly 1 million residents since the conflict escalated. Israeli officials say the ground operation could last well beyond the current conflict with Iran. The ground offensive follows a massive barrage of rockets and drones fired by Hezbollah into Israel. The Iran-backed group says the attacks were in retaliation for the recent assassination of Iran's supreme leader. Meanwhile, Iran is issuing stern warnings to Washington regarding any direct American military intervention. Speaking in Tehran, Iran's deputy foreign minister strongly cautioned the U.S. against deploying troops.
Look, even suggesting that a foreign country can put boots on the ground of another country, invade another country, occupy the land of another country, is something very much rogue, very reckless, illegal, and against all international law. There is no mandate.
Analysts say the new offensive highlights the growing complexity of the war. Opening another front raises questions about whether Israel can sustain long-term operations across multiple battle zones, especially with largely reservist-based military. With tensions rising and no clear path to de-escalation, concerns are growing that the conflict could evolve into a prolonged regional war. 정혜림, Arirang News.
And with the war in the Middle East now into its third week, President Lee Jae-myung has urged his officials to prepare for the worst-case scenarios from the prolonged conflict. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min has this report.
Preparing for the worst-case scenarios stemming from a possible prolonged conflict in the Middle East. That was the message from President Lee Jae-myung on Tuesday as he presided over the weekly cabinet meeting at the government complex in Sejong, noting that oil prices have started to stabilize since a price cap was implemented. But he warned of further uncertainties.
중동 상황이 당초 예상을 뛰어넘는 방향으로 확대되고 있습니다. 현재와 같은 양상이라면 잠시 진정됐던 석유 가격이 다시 불안정해지고 민생 전반에 가해질 충격도 커지게 될 것 같습니다.
He called on officials to supervise prices on site to make sure the price cap is actually reflected at the gas pumps, as some cases have been reported where oil refiners and gas stations raised prices despite the new rule.
We will impose strict punishment on any violation of the oil price cap and the false reporting of supply prices.
On top of that, President Lee emphasized the need to find alternative energy supplies.
UAE에서 추가 원유를 확보했던 것처럼 우리의 외교 역량과 자산을 총동원해서 안정적인 추가 대체 공급선 발굴에 총력을 기울여야 되겠습니다.
He mentioned the possibility of temporarily limiting the use of private vehicles and placing export controls on certain items if necessary. He also instructed the cabinet to swiftly organize an extra budget.
전쟁 추경이 신속하게 집행될 수 있도록 다각도로 노력해 주시기 바랍니다. 결국은 소득 지원 정책을 안 할 수가 없을 것 같은데 이번 추경을 한다면. 그럴 때도 아주 지방에 더 대대적으로 할 수 있게.
Balancing out development across all regions of the country was also on the agenda as the meeting took place in the administrative city of Sejong. Additionally, the cabinet approved a bill aimed at implementing U.S. investment worth $350 billion, for which a strategic investment corporation will be established. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
In the meantime, oil prices pulled back, bringing a sense of relief to the markets. Now, that shifted carried into Seoul, with the domestic stocks closing higher and the Korean one also strengthening. Our Kim Jun-hong reports.
South Korea's financial markets showed signs of relief on Tuesday, with the benchmark index posting strong gains despite ongoing uncertainties in the Middle East. The Kospi closed higher at 5,640.48, led by strong gains in large-cap stocks, as buying in semiconductor and auto shares lifted the overall index. The Kosdaq ended slightly lower, but saw an intraday rebound driven by net retail buying. Meanwhile, the Korean won strengthened slightly, closing at 1,493.6 per dollar, down 3.91 from the previous session. The rally appears to have been driven in part by a recent drop in oil prices, which have been a major source of market swings.
Domestic stocks have been moving in line with oil prices. The recent decline in crude, driven by hopes for a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, helped fuel the rebound, with institutional buying and a slowdown in foreign outflows, adding further support.
Wall Street rebounded overnight to finish higher after posting broad losses in the previous session. Major indexes rose, posting gains of roughly 1%. The gains were largely driven by a pullback in oil prices. Brent crude slipped back toward the $100 level on Monday, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude fell more than 5%. The decline came as reports of ships from countries including India and Pakistan passing through the Strait of Hormuz fueled expectations that the route may reopen. Still, analysts say it remains too early to turn optimistic about the situation in the Middle East, with oil prices likely to stay a key driver of market moves for now. Kim Jun-ho, Arirang News.
South Korea's ruling Democratic Party plans to pass key legislation on a prosecutorial reform at the upcoming plenary session. DP Chairman Chung Chung-lee announced at a press conference on Tuesday that the ruling bloc had reached a coordinated agreement on bills to establish a new major crime investigation office and a public prosecution office. According to the party leader, the core principle of those bills is a strict separation between investigative and prosecutorial powers, designed to prevent prosecutors from intervening in investigations. The plan would also remove special privileges associated with prosecutors. Now, following a parliamentary subcommittee review, the bill is to be reviewed by the National Assembly's Legislation and Judiciary Committee before being submitted to the plenary session on Thursday. And the DP's party also emphasized that the ruling bloc had fully aligned on the proposal and added that it hopes that the reform would end the controversy over prosecutorial power. Shinsegae Group will build a 250-megawatt AI data center, the largest facility of its kind in South Korea, and the first deal done under U.S. President Donald Trump's AI export program. Now, Shinsegae Chairman Jung Yong-jin and Reflection AI CEO Michelle Laskin signed an MOU in San Francisco on Monday to establish a sovereign AI factory with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in attendance. Now, the facility will utilize NVIDIA GPUs supplied by Reflection AI, which is a startup founded by former Google DeepMind and AlphaGo developers. Shinsegae plans to use the massive infrastructure to drive its eMart 2.0 initiative, integrating AI into retail logistics and commerce. The two companies expect to establish a joint venture within the year to begin construction. NVIDIA's annual developer conference, GTC 2026, has begun in California. CEO Jensen Huang announced that the company's latest AI chips are being produced by Samsung Electronics and also revealed a new partnership with Hyundai Motor Group to develop autonomous driving technology. Park Jun-han has more.
NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang declared that the inference inflection point has arrived with the rise of AI agents, shifting the focus from training massive models to super responsive near-instant AI interaction at an unprecedented scale. Speaking at the GTC 2026, Huang predicted that soaring demand for AI processors will drive $1 trillion in sales by 2027.
Finally, AI is able to do productive work, and therefore, the inflection point of inference has arrived. AI now has to think. In order to think, it has to inference. AI now has to do. In order to do, it has to inference. AI has to read. In order to do so, it has to inference. It has to reason. It has to inference. Every part of AI, every time it has to think, it has to reason, it has to do.
During his speech, Huang delivered a special shout-out to South Korea's tech giant Samsung Electronics when introducing the company's latest Vera Rubin chip.
I want to thank Samsung, who manufactures the Grok LP30 chip for us, and they're cranking as hard as they can. I really appreciate you guys.
This marks the first public confirmation that Samsung is now producing custom AI silicon for NVIDIA. On the same day, Hyundai Motor Group announced a strategic partnership with NVIDIA to accelerate the development of software-defined vehicles and autonomous driving. The South Korean carmaker will adopt NVIDIA Drive Hyperion for Level 2 advanced driver assistance systems and eventually Level 4 robotaxis. The system processes massive amounts of AI data, combining Hyundai Motor Group's manufacturing capacity with NVIDIA's AI computing power. The partnership focuses on collecting video, language, and behavioral data, improving AI training and performance, applying the technology to real vehicles, and further enhancing data quality. GTC 2026 runs through Thursday, drawing prominent Korean tech leaders, including SK Group Chairman Choi Tae-won, who was in attendance. SK Hynix showcased its next-generation high-bandwidth memory solutions at the event, where Che indicated to reporters that the company is considering a U.S. ADR listing to broaden its global investor base. Park Jonan, Arirang News.
A trailer for a documentary about mega-hit boy band BTS and the making of their new album has been released on Tuesday. The film, titled BTS The Return, features scenes from the group's world tours and also the process of working on new songs in Los Angeles. In the trailer, the members reflect on their identity and also hint at changes for their upcoming comeback release. The actual documentary film is set to premiere on Netflix on March 27th.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. A total blackout has paralyzed Cuba as the nation's crumbling electrical grid suffered a complete systematic failure. The Cuban Ministry of Energy and Mines on Monday confirmed a complete disconnection of the island's power grid, leaving 11 million people without power. It's the third major island-wide blackout in just 4 months. Cuba has blamed President Donald Trump's recent warning of tariffs on countries that supply oil to Cuba, which has effectively intensified a U.S. energy blockade against the island. President Trump on Monday even suggested the possibility of a friendly takeover, describing Cuba as a, quote, very weakened nation. As well as oil shortages, the Cuban government lacks the hard currency to repair its aging thermoelectric power plants. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy returned to court in Paris on Monday to appeal his conviction for illegal campaign financing involving the Libyan government. Sarkozy is challenging a September ruling that found him guilty of forming what was described as a criminal association to secure funds from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. This landmark verdict marked the first time a former president of modern France received an actual prison sentence. Although the 71-year-old leader spent 20 days in prison last year, an appeals court ordered his release pending this new trial. 9 other co-defendants, including 3 former ministers, also face re-examination of evidence in hearings scheduled through June. Sarkozy has denied all wrongdoing and called the legal proceedings politically motivated. A federal judge in Boston has blocked the Trump administration from cutting down the U.S. childhood vaccine schedule. Judge Brian E. Murphy issued a temporary injunction on Monday against Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s order to end broad recommendations for several childhood vaccines. The decision pauses the administration's plan to stop universal shots for flu, hepatitis, and meningitis. Judge Murphy said that Kennedy likely violated federal law when he changed the entire vaccine advisory panel. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Today started off mostly clear nationwide, but clouds will move in later tonight. Tomorrow will remain mostly cloudy across the country, with air quality staying at bad levels. We'll see spring rain across the country tomorrow. It'll begin in Chungcheongnam-do province and Jeju-do Island from early in the morning, then spread nationwide by late morning. Most of the rain will taper off by the afternoon. Heavier rain is expected along the south coast with up to 30 millimeters lasting into the night. On Jeju, rainfall could exceed 70 millimeters through early Friday morning. Tomorrow, Seoul will begin the day at 6 degrees Celsius, Daejeon at 5 degrees, Busan at 10 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will rise up to 11 degrees, while Daegu, Gwangju, Busan topping out at 13 degrees. After the rain, the skies will turn mostly clear. We'll see typical spring weather with large day-to-night temperature swings continuing for the rest of the week. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have at this hour. A panel discussion's coming up. Stay tuned.